I want to introduce to you tonight our guest preacher. This is Neil Anderson, and Neil served in the local church for a long time as a preaching pastor, and then the Lord called him out into education. And today he serves as the head of Trinity Classical School here in Houston and helps plant churches, plant schools all over the United States. And he is an incredible guy that has a heart for Jesus. And I know that you guys are going to be blessed tonight. And out of his schedule and all that he has going on, when I called him to talk about this, Neil, I just want you to know I appreciate your eagerness to want to come and speak and glorify Jesus. And so could you guys give a huge welcome to Neil for coming here tonight to speak to us?
Hey, good evening. Thanks, Brad. Two quick things about Brad. In case you don't know, well, the most important thing to me is he's one of the only dudes, one of the only men in my life who tells me that he loves me on a regular basis. So that's pretty encouraging. It was a little awkward when he first started. The first day we met, he told me he loved me, but now he says it for real. And the second thing is, I think he's one of the only pastors in Houston that doesn't drink coffee, which I think makes him super suspect as a pastor. And you should not feel as good about what's happening here any longer. No, but for real, when I meet him, man, this guy has some zeal for the Lord, and he has some zeal for what the Lord's doing here. So just know that. He just wants to process and pray, and I'm blessed to know him. I'm blessed to be here tonight. I want to talk about mercy. I want to talk about mercy. And I want the Lord to help us tonight. On this topic, I think I have a good word for you. I teach a couple classes of senior lit and poetry at the school, and just recently we read a poem called Remembrance by a Russian poet named Pushkin. His last name is Pushkin, Alexander Pushkin. So he wrote this poem called Remembrance, and we're kind of trying to prepare the students to get ready to read Crime and Punishment. And in this short poem, what happens is there's a man, probably Pushkin himself, who goes to bed anxious. Maybe you go to bed anxious. I don't know if you struggle with that. Sometimes the nighttime brings about strange thoughts that don't see the light of day, but they feel very real at night. And what happens in this poem is Remembrance is personified as a woman who stands at the foot of his bed and slowly unwinds a scroll of his life. And he reads the scroll of his life in the middle of the night. And at the end of the poem, he says, "Woe is me," basically. He says he wants to curse his natal day because who can wipe this script away? Who can wipe this script away? The story of his life. Now, I wish I could tell you that the poem takes a redemptive turn, but it does not. It's a depressing poem. So I want to give you the not depressing part tonight. Because there was a woman in the first century who was drug out of town by some religious leaders, brought into the temple, surrounded by the people there. And the men had two motives. They had spite for her, and they wanted to test this Jesus guy, right? You know the story in John chapter 8, verse 1, which we'll read in just a minute. And her script was brought out publicly. A script that I'm sure she could want to wash away aspects of it, right? And so tonight, I want us to reflect on what Jesus did with that script, what that looked like in her life, and the impact it made on the men and women standing around that scene. John chapter 8, verse 1 through 11 reads this way. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came into the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman, but what do you say?" They said this to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. And Jesus bent down and he wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him in the background, imagine Jesus just starting to kind of tune that out as his gaze gets sort of laser focused on this woman. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, well, first, Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. And Jesus stood up and said to her, woman, where are they? Ma'am, where are they? Has no one condemned you? And she said, no one, Lord. And Jesus said, neither do I condemn you. Go and from now on sin no more. So a couple questions for you this evening before we jump in further. How do you feel about your scroll in the presence of Jesus? Where is the gap between what you know to be true up here and what you experience to be true in his presence? When the stones are dropped and the accusers flee and you stand face to face with Jesus, what does he say to you? And maybe more importantly, do you believe it? There's this theory that this one pastor has. No one knows what Jesus wrote in the ground, I don't think. This one pastor that I heard talk about a theory that Jesus wrote on the ground. First of all, he wrote down there because that's where the woman's gaze would be. He wasn't writing for anybody else, he was writing for her. It could have also been because she was crumpled to her knees, so he wrote to communicate to her. The thought is that he wrote something for her, something that would make her look up. So where is your gaze tonight? I want us to work together to look up. Let me pray for us, and then we'll go further. Jesus, I have no idea what's going on in this room in the hearts of these people. But I would assume that we all grapple and struggle with what you think about us. When the crowd clears and the accusers stand down and we turn our eyes upon Jesus like we just sang, what are you saying to us? Pray that you'd help us to hear you tonight and to believe you. And I pray these things in your awesome name, Jesus. Amen. This is my thesis. The Jesus follower who is truly free has a beloved identity because he or she has experienced that his mercy never ends. The Jesus follower who is truly free has taken on that beloved identity, meaning that they know they're beloved. They have a confidence in that reality because they have experienced that his mercy never ends. And the word experience there to me is very important. Not have read, not have contemplated, but like the woman in the temple have experienced that his mercy is rich and deep and never ends. The never ends part is tough for us, and so we're going to deal with that a little bit more in just a second. So we're going to work through this in three ways. First, we're going to consider mercy is experienced, needs to be experienced. Mercy needs to be assumed, and mercy grants access. Mercy is experienced. Think about this as a definition of applied mercy or the experience of mercy. Someone with power, authority, or position. Someone with power, authority, or position has the means, the ability to make your life worse, the same, or better, always makes it better. Someone with the authority, power, position to make your life worse, the same, or better, always makes it better. This is the nature of mercy. And this is not what we often experience in our lives, right? This isn't necessarily our day-to-day experience. So there's this growing disconnect with what we experience day-to-day and who we conceive of Jesus to be. When I was in college, I worked a union concrete job in the city of Chicago. And a buddy had hooked me up with a job, and I had just gotten married young. I needed to make some money real fast. And so I took this job, and my vision of this job was, you had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, call into the operator. He tells you what address to go to. There's no I'm printing out a Google map, to get to the place downtown. And there's 5 foremen that you could work for, so you're showing up with a different foreman each day. And my vision of the job was, I got my work boots, I got my tool belt, I got my hammer, and I show up, I'm looking for someone to be apprentice for. Someone's going to take me under their wing, and show me the trade, and I'm going to become tough concrete union Chicago guy. That is not what happened at all. I roll in. The first thing, I walk up to this foreman. His name was Paulie, smoking a cigarette, thick Chicago accent. And he looks at me, and I didn't know this, but what is the tradition? They look at the newcomer. He looks me up and down, and immediately he says, "What's your name?" I tell him my name, and he gives you a nickname. And it's a nickname I cannot repeat in this church. Not like join the crew. Here's hardworking Neil. It's like a nickname. Gave me an identity right out the gate. And then you know what happens? He assigns you a job he knows you don't know how to do, demands you go do it, and ridicules you for doing it wrong. And then the next phase of apprenticeship is once you start to figure out on your own how to do things from kind of, looking around and whatnot, it's this everyday game of trying to do it right. But what a foreman makes sure that you know is that you will never reach the standard of what right is. A merciless job. Not only no attaboy, but oppressive. I was afraid to go to work. Now, this is a very formative time in my life. I wouldn't wish it upon any of you, but it helped me figure some things out. But it also confused some things, it's like a little turn of the dial, right? This little notch that notches into my perception of what the Father's like. Dialed maybe 2 little clicks the wrong way. And I know I'm speaking to some of you tonight who probably had merciless parents, right? Mom, dad, both. The language of mercy was not part of your home. It was not part of your flow. And what does that mean for you now? You struggle to conceive of the types of words the Father, that Jesus the Son, as he kind of comes incarnate into our lives, you struggle to conceive of the type of words that would be pure and abundant mercy, letting you off the hook over and over again. It's just difficult to conceive of. That's not something you've known. Mercy in the life that we live shocks us. It surprises us, and it shouldn't. I used to live in Baytown, Texas. There's this little scene that this happened like 20 years ago, and it stays with me. I don't think you do this anymore. I don't know if I was supposed to do it then, but I'm at like a local utility office to get my power turned on when we moved into a new house. And you got to walk in and fill out a paper, something like that. So I'm standing in line, and there's a guy in front of me, and there's a lady holding a baby with two girls next to her, sits down, and the guy and I are sitting behind her, she's giving her spiel about why she can't pay the bill. They turned her power off, she can't pay the bill, she's giving her spiel, the lady behind the desk just kind of looking at her, nodding, and basically like, there's nothing I can do. Like, it's not necessarily I don't believe you, but there's nothing I can do for you. Of course, she wasn't trying, she wasn't getting a supervisor, she wasn't trying very hard, but she says, there's nothing I can do for you. So the woman walks out, and the man in front of me sits down, and he looks at the lady behind the desk, and he says, how much does she owe? Right? How much does she owe? The man with the authority and the power and the position and the money in his pocket says, how much does she owe? Which might have been pennies to him, I don't know. And he says, I'm gonna pay the bill. Can I pay the bill? Am I allowed to do that? And she's like, oh, no one's ever done it before. Then she gets the supervisor. Like, this guy wants to pay her bill. She's like, yeah, just let him pay it. So he pays it. And he leaves after he pays his bill. And then I sit down, and she says, hold on just a second, sir. And she picks up the phone and calls the lady's house and leaves a message and says, hey, someone just paid your bill. Someone will show up tomorrow to turn your power back on. I believe, we crave mercy. We crave for someone who's in the power and the position and has the authority to make our lives better. I mean, even the day-to-day, you guys. I mean, the wheel is spinning. You're clocking in your hours at the office. You're trying to get the raise. You're trying to climb the ladder. Mom or dad is at home. The laundry's piling up. The kids need all these things. All the schedules are crisscrossing. And there's this thing that rises up in us. It's kind of like, can I just get a break? Like, who's the one that's ever going to let me off this hamster wheel? Because I am dog tired. And I've got a burden on my shoulders that I don't think I can carry that much longer. Or you get a vision, right? I'm going to get more encouraging in a minute. The depressing thing is you're wearing this weight on your shoulder and you're looking out ahead of your life and you don't see a clearing. Like, when is the moment when that will go away? When the kids get out of the house? That's happening to me right now. I'm telling you right now, that's not the moment when you got to start paying for all the colleges. It's not then. Right? There's this craving for, it's like the term paper is lingering over our life, at all times, that feeling. And if it isn't clear yet, Jesus is the one with the power and the authority and the position to not make your life worse, to not keep it the same, but to make it better over and over and over again. Jesus is the Good Samaritan. The man walks on the road. There are people who have authority to make the man's life worse, and they beat him down on the side of the road and they rob him. And then there's two men who have the power and position to make his life better. And not only do they walk past him, but they kind of keep clear of the mess. And then there's one man who gets in the dirt and starts administering first aid. Jesus is the Good Samaritan. He's riding in the dirt to the woman. He's got his knees in the dirt to the man who's just banged up and robbed. And this is the Jesus who's showing up to you over and over and over again. Mercy is not only to be experienced, it is to be assumed. I think one of the biggest challenges for us, we sing about abiding. I mean, that's been a huge thing. I took a sabbatical last winter, and probably the biggest theme of my life since has been the concept of abiding with Jesus and what that looks like and how good that can get. But I believe one of the biggest challenges to that abiding fellowship is our inability to assume mercy. Let me explain what I mean. There's a difference between assumption and abuse. Paul talks about abuse in Romans, right? In chapter 6, when Paul says, should we sin all the more that grace should abound? Should we take advantage of that mercy and that grace? And then Paul's answer, of course, is no to that. But the writer of Hebrews in chapter 4 says, you know the verse, let us approach the throne of grace with confidence. Let us approach the throne of grace with confidence that we would have an assumption that mercy will always be dispensed. And for those of you that, that it serves you well to kind of have mental pictures of what this should look like, I would suggest maybe that the throne scene is not so much what you might need right now. I mean, I know that we do need someone who's, powerful enough, seated on the throne to kind of come in and conquer our problems. But probably what we need more to get to track with this idea of mercy is that the type of throne, if you would, the writer of Hebrews is painting a picture of the high priest Jesus in replacement. But the stories that the gospel writer is telling are stories of a type of throne that looks like lounging in the midst of 12 disciples and breaking a piece of bread and passing out a cup with disciple John leaning on the breast and disciple Peter over there, probably a little frustrated and frazzled. But Jesus' incarnate throne looks like a mule. It looks like a seat at a table reclined where he governs and rules in the way of peace and lowliness and meekness. And this is the type of throne I think we need to encounter to grasp the mercy that never ends. We have a hesitant approach to the throne of grace. And so I want to try to knock down some of those barriers a little bit. I mean, you think you're not enough. That you'll never be enough. There's some sort of conversation that takes place as we approach the throne or as we encounter Jesus, or our gaze is down, but it starts to look up. But even in that space, we're not sure what to say. We're not sure fully what he thinks about us. Are we living right? Are we not? Those sins from yesterday, what I read what Paul says I'm supposed to be experiencing here, but I don't know what you really think. And so there's this transactional relationship in our minds and our prayer life where it seems like we've got to get conditioned to encounter the merciful presence. Think about it this way. When Jesus stoops to wash Peter's feet, you remember what Peter says? No way, man. You're not washing mine. I know this little trick here, and the disciples have been already arguing about, who's going to be the greatest, and Jesus is showing them the way to humility, and maybe Peter's thinking it's like a test or something. No way, man. You can wash their feet. They don't get it. You're not washing mine. Give me the towel. I'm going to wash yours. And Jesus gets kind of ticked off. You remember that passage? Jesus says, Peter, if you don't let me wash your feet, you have no part in me. If you don't let me wash your feet, you have no part in me. That sounds kind of harsh. You remember, and then Peter's like, well, then wash the whole deal. And Jesus is like, no, you still don't get it. You believe in me, Peter. You have faith in me. You've called me the Messiah. I don't need to wash your body. That's already been done. I need you to get it through your thick head that this is the way I plan to show up to you every single day. And unless you learn that the mercy of Jesus shows up like this in your life, you sit above and he comes down, the merciful incarnate Savior, and he's ready to wash at your feet. And this is the position he's showing up every day. Unless we can grasp this, Jesus is saying, you won't get relationship with me. You won't get it. And we say, okay, Jesus, I get it. Tomorrow when I wake up, I'm going to let you wash my feet. Monday. But Tuesday is a little I get the point, Jesus, not Tuesday again. And the way of mercy, the way of Jesus is this is how you need to see me. This is what relationship with me looks like. Just when you think my mercy has run dry and I'm tired of stooping at your feet to wash, he's saying, I've got endless energy for this. I've got endless energy for this. Mercy grants access. This is my final point. Experienced mercy and assumed mercy pave the way for the abiding presence of Jesus that has no barrier, no closed door, no sense of distance or displeasure. Will you listen to that one more time? Especially those of you, if I've lost you, any of you tonight, those of you who are struggling to find access to the abiding presence of Jesus that feels safe and comfortable and loving and accepting, listen to this again. Experienced mercy, once you've experienced his mercy, and you've learned to assume that mercy, that it will always be there and won't change. These things pave the way for the abiding presence of Jesus that has no barrier, no closed door, no sense of distance or displeasure. You see, mercy doesn't open the door. Grasping mercy helps you to realize that you've been in the house the whole time. You just didn't know it. Y'all, any Narnia fans out there? I'm in classical education, so I have to like C.S. Lewis, all right? The last book, the seventh book, The Last Battle, is probably one of the least known. But there's this scene, if you guys read it before, and if you haven't read it, it'll kind of make sense. But the dwarves are being kind of rescued and saved, and they're starting to move into that further up and further inland. You know, Lewis's kind of concept of the deeper places in God, and you all know the character Aslan. Well, the dwarves have been kind of bamboozled for the whole book because there's this fake Aslan messing up things because he is acting like Aslan and looks like Aslan. No, he looks like Aslan, but he's not acting like Aslan, right? So the dwarves are jaded, and the real Aslan's back making the movement into that safe place. And part of that movement, it's hard to explain here, but involves kind of a barn and a dark place and a prison. But basically what happens is the dwarves have been moved into safety by the real Aslan, and they're sitting in the dark of a prison, and the lion is kind of hovering over them, calling people up, further in, and the dwarves are sitting there in the dark, and what Aslan says is, they're trapped in the prison of their minds. They have been freed, and if they're able really to open the eyes of faith, they will see that there is no dark shelter. They're actually in the land of promise, but they're trapped here. And this is us. Oftentimes we come into the presence of the Lord, we start to conceive of his abiding presence in prayer, and we just kind of can't get there. And that's an us problem. That's not a him problem. He's not out there somewhere wondering if you're going to find your way to him. He is always in you, around you, abiding. You are in his house at all times, whether you realize it or not. The goal of the Christian life is to try to realize that you're always there. Those who have known mercy and assumed mercy find themselves readily in fellowship with Jesus. Your day begins with immediate embrace. Friends, if by the Spirit of God we could grow over time to wake up in the morning not trying to get adjusted or to kind of find and claw our way into the merciful, accepted place of Jesus where we are his beloved sons and daughters, if that could be an immediate reality in our hearts and minds when we wake up, we will find the freedom of life in the Lord. So that's my call to you tonight. Are you craving mercy? Are you ready to try believing that he's present to wash your feet every morning? He's ready to kneel in the dirt to bandage your fresh wounds from yesterday. He's ready to convince you over and over that he has no stones in his hands. He has no stones in his hands. Never did, never will. So here's a simple recommendation as we move to a time of prayer and worship. There's lots of things that I could give you, I think, to focus on. But maybe if you want to take me up on this, maybe start a new practice this week. And here's the recommendation. Every morning or evening, find 15 minutes to sit somewhere quietly, just reflecting on the presence of Jesus, his abiding presence with you and around you. And pray a simple prayer like this every single time. Jesus, who am I to you? Just sit there in his presence. Put your cell phone in another room, please. I'm serious about that part. Take your cell phone out of your pocket, walk into another room, put it in a drawer, and then walk back into that other spot and sit there for 15, 20 minutes, grow some stamina over time, and sit directly in the presence of Jesus and ask him, what do you think about me? And let him impress that answer on you over time and see your life transformed. You need that answer from him. Preachers are going to tell you the answer. Teachers are going to tell you the answer. Parents are going to tell you the answer, and all that's well and good. But if you want your life transformed, you need to hear him say that answer to you over and over again. I'm going to pray. And as I pray, there's going to be prayer partners up here at the front. We're going to have a little time of worship. If you want to come up and receive prayer, if you want to obviously take the posture of prayer in your seats, let's just respond to the Lord together, okay? God bless you. It's good to be here tonight.
Hey, thanks for watching. To find out more about Houston's First, you can subscribe to our channel or you can go to houstonsfirst.org.